почна интересот на Европската унија за климатските промени и ефектите на климата?
Well, it started a long time ago, quite some years ago, I would say. We've always been rather deeply involved in climate discussions. We, at the time where the Kyoto Protocol was negotiated, we were already deeply involved in the negotiations. Since then, we swiftly ratified the Kyoto Protocol, and we are now implementing the Kyoto target. And I have to say we're well on track to comply with the Kyoto target. And since then, we've already decided to look beyond that and to put in place binding legislation with targets for 2020 with the aim of reducing our emissions by 20% by 2020, and also enhancing the share of renewable energy in the energy mix by 20% by the same date. So yes, we are very ambitious, we're very determined, we're taking a lot of action in the EU, and we have already a comprehensive legislative framework in place to be on track to meet these targets. We definitely believe that we need to do a fair share of the effort. This is a global issue. This is an urgent one. And as a developed country, we need to do this effort. But I must say that we also believe that it's not only for the sake of fighting climate change, it's also because it's in our self-interest to do so together with an appropriate set of energy policy, because it brings very important co-benefits. And it's also, I would say, even important to tackle the economic crisis we are in at the moment, and you know it's a severe one, because it brings important benefits in terms, for instance, of energy savings, in terms of reducing our dependency on energy imports, and it creates jobs as well. It's part of green growth, it creates green jobs, and as such it helps to tackle the crisis. So it's a way not to add another crisis to the existing crisis, but rather is part of the solution. So for all these reasons, we're determined indeed to go ahead with this package, and we're even thinking already ahead, looking at the long-term perspective, what would be needed for the EU to prepare for a low-carbon economy by 2050.
Колку сметате дека ова е заедничка акција на земјите членки, а колку тоа зависи од индивидуалната волја на секоја од земјите?
No, I think that's a very good question, because we have taken these targets jointly. So that means that's a joint collective effort by the EU, and we have a number of policy tools that are fully harmonized in the EU, and that's notably the case of the emissions trading scheme, which covers the most polluting installations in the EU, across the EU. But we also have tools that allow for differentiation in between member states, depending on criteria like GDP per capita, depending on the various potential out there in member states, depending, in short, in national circumstances. So it's at the same time an EU collective effort, but while allowing differentiation in between member states. And the beauty of it, and that's because it's the EU, I would say, is that it allows for fairness, it allows for equity, it allows for solidarity among member states. And there is a number of redistribution tools that allows the richest member states to support those who need the support in order to move in the same direction. So I think it's a very complex set of tools, but at the same time allowing the EU to come at the international level and to say that's what we want to put on the table, that's our fair share, while also getting everybody on board in the EU and feeling comfortable while being in different situations.
Од аспект на мотивација, колку се разликуваат земјите членки во поглед на климатската акција? Дали се некои помотивирани и поангажирани, повеќе свесни да се каже во врска со климатските промени или сите подеднакво до некаде ги разбираат овие работи?
Well, I would not go as far as saying that everybody is equally motivated. Some are definitely strongly motivated and really believe, and they would even wish to go beyond what we agreed upon in 2008. But I think everybody is equally concerned about climate change. Everybody realizes that climate change already has an impact in its own country. And everybody is convinced that we need to act now because otherwise it's going to be even more costly. I think everybody feels comfortable with what we agreed upon because of this fairness dimension. And I would even say, and that's what is being discussed at the moment also in Brussels, in between the Commission, the Council and the Parliament, we're discussing the new budget cycle for 2014-2020, and there as well there will be a new envelope for climate action that will help again those member states that may need that to go and to support the move towards a low carbon economy in their country. So all in all, I think some may be more ambitious than others, but everybody feels, I think, comfortable with what we have. Of course, I think we all are also in the process of discussing whether and to what extent we can be even more ambitious. This is being discussed and it's going to take a bit of time, and that's where you see also perhaps the differences. But I think everybody is now completely convinced of the need to act, and for the EU to act and to lead, because it's really a global race. So other key actors around us, like China, for instance, are taking action. And as soon as they start, we know they will be very, very quick. So if we don't want to lag behind, and that can happen very quickly, I think we need to be very cautious and continue with the right level of ambition while keeping everybody on board.
Како се промени климата во Европа во изминатите години и кои се најнегативните ефекти кои што од таа промена произлегува?
Well, there has been a continuous trend that climate has an increasing impact, including in Europe. I mean, it's been documented. We have, the last IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, consisting of more than 400 scientists around the world, which have looked at the impacts of climate change on the world in general, including on Europe. They've issued a couple of months ago a new report looking at vulnerabilities. There again, in this report, it's clear that Europe is also impacted. Of course, Europe is not as impacted as other regions of the world, like, for instance, Africa or like Asia, because last year Asia was really severely impacted. But Europe is definitely, and you see that on a number of very important sectors, like agriculture. Like agriculture in Southern Europe, for instance, it has enormous implications. The water stress is becoming very, very acute, and we need to look at that. It has implications on infrastructure, transport infrastructure, all new big infrastructures across the board that need to be built now need to take into account the adaptation challenge, need to be climate proof if they want to last 1, 2, 3 decades. So yes, I think we've been more active on emission reduction in the past than on adaptation. But now, in the light of the new information that is coming, we are getting extremely active on the adaptation side. Looking across the board at what needs to be done in terms of research, because we need probably more information to know exactly what kind of impact on which region and so on and so forth, the mountains, for instance, as well. And we are developing a strategy that should be coming out at the beginning of next year to look across the board in the different EU policies what would need to be done to better reflect the challenge of adaptation to climate change.
Како ја проценувате ситуацијата на Балканот на овој план и колку климата на Балканот има влијание врз климата на Европа во целина?
The latter part of the question is very tricky and it's very scientific, so I will not get into that. I don't really have sufficient sort of knowledge to get into that. The fact is that it is clear that it is quite evident that climate change is also happening here in the Balkan region overall. I mean, you have seen quite a number of extreme weather events in the last years. It is quite clear that they will become more frequent in terms of floods, in terms of droughts, from one extreme to the other. So that is also very clear. It has impacts on key sectors, like for instance in this country, agriculture. So the agricultural sector, which is a very important sector of the economy, is getting more and more vulnerable to climate change, and we'll need to do probably to work with researchers again to look into ways to make agriculture smart in the light of these changes, because inevitably, whether we like it or not, and even if we take very strong action on the side of emissions, the impact is there and we'll have to cope with it. So I think we'll have to invest, and you will have to invest also into that in the coming years.
Каква акција се очекува од Македонија како земја кандидат за членство во Европската Унија во поглед на климатските промени? Значи, ова климатска акција, постојат ли прописи на ниво на Европската Унија кои што се задолжителни и веќе се очекува да започне ги применува и нашата земја?
Well, as an accession country, of course, Macedonia the country should be prepared